नमो नमः प्रियमित्राणि। अस्मिन् सप्ताहे वयं धातूनां दशगणानां विषये इतोपि किञ्चित् सम्यक् परिचयं प्राप्तवन्तः। अद्य वयं तत्र धातूनां दशलकाराणां विषये इतोपि किञ्चित् ज्ञास्यामः एण्ड् तत्रापि कर्मवाच्यस्य किञ्चित् परिचयं प्राप्स्यामः। तर्हि नमस्ते dear friends and a very warm welcome to this session once more. In this week, we've been focusing on looking at the different verbs, the groups of the different verbs, in order to try and understand their characteristics that allows them to become part of that particular classification. In today's class, we're going to be looking at another aspect of the verbs, which is the 10 tenses and moods, or the dasha lakaraha. So, in today's class, which is part of module 5, looking at the revision of Dhatu Rupani and an introduction to Karmavachyam, we are looking at lecture 15, which is an understanding of the 10 lakaras, as I mentioned, in the Parasmaipadi and in the Atmanepadi. So the concepts that are covered in this particular session are a quick overview of the revision of the building blocks of a sentence, some general information on the dhatus, an introduction to all the 10 lakaras representing the tenses and moods, and we'll do some practice conjugating them in the Parasmaipadi and in the Atmanepadi. And then we'll follow up with a conversation for building vocabulary and application of the points learnt. And then we'll close with some verses defining Tirthanusaranam, which is the next quality in the verse on Dharma. And then there's a quote by Swami Paramahamsa Yogananda on the importance of Tirthanusaranam. So this is an overview of the Sanskrit sentence, and we've been focusing on the Subantas. We've done that already, and last time we were looking at the 10 ganas. In today's section, as we mentioned, we're going to be looking at the 10 lakaras and how they are a part of the Atmanepadi conjugation or the Parasmaipadi. But what we are going to be looking at is one verb, the verb pach in particular, that is an Ubhayapadi verb. It can be done or it can be conjugated in the Atmanepadi as well as in the Parasmaipadi. And what determines that? So when we are doing the cooking, pach meaning cooking, when you're cooking for somebody else, then it is in the Parasmaipadi. When you're cooking, the fruit of the cooking is enjoyed by the doer himself or the cook himself or herself, then it is in the Atmanepadi. So that's why this is a verb which is an Ubhayapadi verb. The same for you with an example of Balakaha Gacchati. Some facts about Sanskrit dhatu. So there are more than 2000 roots, as we've seen earlier, enumerated by the ancient grammarians, and less than half are used, around 800 of them. And tadapi yataha vayam idanim sambhashanam na kurma Sanskrite adhikam na cha tatra tatha lekhaha bhavati ataha tatra bhashayaha prayogaha athava dhatunam prayogaha न्यूनः जातः वर्तते, किन्तु आशां करोमि यत् सर्वे अपि मिलित्वा यदा वयं संस्कृतस्य सम्भाषणं प्रचारं तत्र लेखनं च करिष्यामः तदानीं पुनरपि तेषां धातूनाम् अपि पुनरुज्जीवनं भविष्यति इति. अस्तु, तर्हि what are the different components of the Sanskrit verb? प्रथमभागः अस्ति the root or the dhatuः plus the suffix or the vikarana pratyayah that we are now very familiar with, and then the ending or the tingantaha, which will tell us specifically who is doing it, which purusha is doing it, how many are doing it, which vachana is it, and finally what is the tense or the mood or the lakaraha itself. Astu, so there are 10 ganas, as we've seen, which are the classification of the verbs into the 10 groups. The verbs can have several meanings. They are nanarthakaha dhatavaha, and sometimes depending on which group they are, they carry different meanings altogether. And then the verbs can also be conjugated, as we've seen in the Parasmaipadi, where the fruit is directed towards another. It can be an Atmanepadi where it is towards oneself. And some verbs have both forms. They are Ubhayapadi, and they do not really change meaning also. And sometimes they do, but sometimes they need not. And then there are the 10 lakaras or the tenses and moods in which the verbs are conjugated. So, dasha gananam parichaya tatra Bhvadyadadi juhotyadi divadiswadirevacha tudadishcharudhadischa tanakryadishchuradayah. Astu, etat yadi jananti tari dashagananam parichayam samyak jnasyanti api, because if you just know how each of those verbs is conjugated in the beginning, then you'll have an idea of the kind of vikarana pratyayaha that is introduced in that particular group. Another format for understanding the dhatu ganaha with their vikarana pratyayaha. So let's look at the 10 lakaras. Tatra pratham, which is the focus in fact of our study today. Tatra prathama lakara asti lat lakara uta vartamana kalaha. Dvitiya asti, or the present tense, dvitiya asti the lit, parokshe lit, which means that it is a past tense, but that which is beyond the period that we can witness. It's not pratyaksha, it's paroksha. And then you have the lut, which is the anadyatana bhavishya. So the lut is a future which is not of the present time, but later on, not today's future. Rit adyatana bhavishyadasti. Rit is within the scope of today, the future that will happen within the scope of today. Lot is the ajna or the imperative mood. Lang is the anadyatana bhuta. So lang is the past tense which has not happened today. Vidhiling is the form that is used for ordaining something which has to be done according to a particular norm. And then you have got the ashirling, which is the ling that is associated with the blessings of somebody. So it must happen this way in that context. And then you've got the lung, the adyatana bhuta. So it's a past tense within the scope of today. And then you've got the ring or the bhavishyat, but this is a bhavishyat and a bhuta combined. It's the ring, also known as the kriyati patil ring, which indicates that something could have happened if something else was in a particular case. So, for example, if there was time, then I would have completed my book, for example. Okay, so this kind of a future in the past, or the future in the past, is the kind of a ring that is being referred to in this context. Now, I would just like to mention to you that it's a very beautiful way of organizing. Tari lakaranam atra vyavastha bahu uttama asti. Karanam, it goes with the swaras and the lat, the takara first, and then the ng that comes in. So lat, lit, so a, I, u, ha. So you've got lat, lit, lut, rit, lot. And I'd just like to mention that there is another lakara, anya eka lakara asti, vede late iti. Tari late lakarasya vede eva upayogaha bhavati anantaram tasya vayam na pashyamaha prayogam. Tari late kintu atah atra na yojitam asti. Atra in fact ling dvayam asti. So you've got the lung, ling, so vidhi ling and ashir ling. Ling dvayam antarbhutam asti. Punaha lung asti and ring for the bhavishyat. So just in terms of memory, there is an easy kind of a logic underlying the lakaras. Astu agre pashyama. Adya vayam pach dhatoho ubhayapadyam rupani dasha lakareshu drakshyamaha. Tatrapi pach dhatuhu bhuadi ganasya uta prathama ganasya dhatuhu asti. And etadapi satyam yat pratyeka ganasya स्वभावः वर्तते यदा दशलकारेषु रूपाणि भवन्ति किन्तु वयं सर्वान् द्रष्टुं न शक्ष्यामः सर्वान् धातून् तत्र द्रष्टुं क्लेशाय भवति अस्मिन् निर्दिष्टे काले किन्तु वयम् आशां कुर्मः यद् अत्र परिचयं प्राप्य अन्येषां धातूनाम् अपि दशलकारेषु ज्ञातुम् उत्साहः युष्मासु भविष्यति इति. Tari pach dhatoho moolam kim asti. Now you would never imagine that the root of the verb pach is something as complex as dupachangsh pake, as you can see, to cook, because it's the first gana atah tatra shap vikarana pratyaha asti. But just I was talking to Piyush and saying that, you know, imagine the genius of Panini, that he felt the need to add these extra sounds like do and pa and pacha and then the sh at the end. So we see that there are specific sutras that then lead it up to the form of pach that we are more familiar with in the context of cooking. And tat sarvam bhavati, and you come down here and you see that there is the present groups forms that are there to make it the parasmaipadi pachati. And then there is actually just one extra sutra, which is tita atmane padanam tere येन एषः धातुः पचते इति आत्मनेपदी अपि मिलति। तर्हि वयं प्रथमलकारः तत्र लट् लकारे वर्तमाने परस्मैपद्यां रूपाणि प्रथमं दृष्ट्वा अनन्तरं वर्तमानकाले आत्मनेपद्याम् अपि द्रक्ष्यामः। अस्तु, आरम्भे तर्हि मिलित्वा वदामः, कारणं भवन्तः एतानि रूपाणि सम्यक् एव जानन्ति। तर्हि पचति, पचतः, पचन्ति, पचसि, पचथः, पचथ, पचामि, पचावः, पचामः। उत्तमम्। आत्मनेपद्यां किं भवति? पचते, पचेते, पचन्ते, पचसे, पचेथे, पचध्वे, पचे, पचावहे, पचामहे। अस्तु, तत्र च एकं साम्यं वर्तते। तर्हि अहम् एतत् अन्यप्रकारमपि प्रस्तुतं तस्य प्रस्तावनम् अकरवं। तत्र किं च पश्यामः? पचति, पचते। तर्हि तयोः एकं तुलनात्मकाध्ययनं कर्तुं शक्नुवन्ति, यत्र द्रष्टुं शक्नुवन्ति किं समानम् अस्ति, किं च परिवर्तितम् अस्ति यदा वयं परस्मैपद्यां कुर्मः, पुनः आत्मनेपद्यां कुर्मः. So I've just given you in a format that will help you do a little bit of a comparative study of the Parasmaipadi and the Atmanepadi forms. And you see you've got Pachati and Pachate, Pachasi and Pachase. So E becomes A generally, Pachami and Pache, it's a little different. And then basically look at all the different forms to become a little more familiar with the application in these two kinds of conjugations of the same verb. Astu, tatrapi tari vayam ekam vakyam kurma atra that they too cook food for their friend. They too cook food for their friend. Iti vadantu vakyam. They too. Tari te cook food. So cook will be pachataha. Okay. So let me take that for you. So te pachataha for their friend. Tari they too. So tayoho mitrabhyam krite. Okay. Or tayoho mitrabhyam also can work. So te pachataha, te bhojanam pachataha, tayoho mitrayoho krite or tayoho mitrabhyam. Astu, uttamam. Now I'd like you to do it in the for themselves. If they were now cooking for themselves, what would happen? So they too cook for themselves some food. Tari they, because they too cook for themselves, so it will become pachete bhojanam. Okay, the moment you say bhojanam pachete, we understand that it is happening for them. Uttamam. Agre gacchamaha. So this is the next one, which is the lit parokshe, lit iti, and tatra kim bhavati? Papacha, pechatuhu, pechuhu, pechitha, pechathuhu, pecha. Astu, anantaram papacha, papacha, and then pechiva and pechima. So vayam pashyama yat prayah atra pe iti rupam yojitam bhavati tatra. And prathamam atra prathama purushasya punaha uttama purushasya ekavachane samanam api rupam tatra vartate. Papacha, papacha, punaha papacha api eka vikalpena bhavitum arhati. Atmanepadyam kim bhavati? Tari krippaya maya sah etesham rupanam abhyasam kurvantu. Tenaiva mukhe etesham kim vadama parichayah bhavishati. Tena cha yada upayogakalah bhavati saralataram tad nirgamishyati. Ataha avashyam tatra maya saha vadantu and samakale tasya arthabodham api manasi sthapya kurvantu. Tarhi peche बहु विचित्ररूपाणि सन्ति कानिचन कारणं सामान्यतः वयम् एतेषाम् उपयोगं न कुर्मः. So these are all very strange forms, a little strange simply because of the fact that we don't really use them so often in our languages. Astu. So please make sure that you're saying it along so that you have a little more familiarity and confidence with the application of this particular verb at least. So peche, pechate, pechire, pechishe, pechathe, pechidhve, peche, samanam as the prathama purusha, like you can see also with the parasmaipadi, pechivahe and pechimahe. Astu. So how would you say, so they, let's say in the Ramayana Kala, okay, they cooked food for, themselves. Okay, so what would happen? It will become te bhojanam pechire. Okay, this is one form that you find very often in the texts, where if you have the as dhatu, it will become babhuva. So bhu or as dhatu tend to become babhuva. Iti rupani jagama babhuva. That's part of this parokshe lit iti rupam. So you have another format of doing the comparative study for the two kinds of conjugations, Atmanepadi and Parasmaipadi. Agre gachamaha. So we've got the lut, the anadyatana bhavishyat, and tatra rupam bhavati pakta, paktarau, paktaraha, paktasi, paktasthaha, paktastha, paktasmi, paktasvaha, and paktasmaha. Uttamam. Atmanepadyam kim bhavati? Pakta. Pashatu samanam rupam. Tatra vastutah prathama purushasya parasmaipadyam puna atmanepadyam samanameva rupam asti. Astu pakta, paktaro, paktaraha. Spashtam? Agre kim bhavati? Pakta se. Tari si tasya se bhavati yatha vartamana kale api bhavati. Paktasthaha. Atra paktasthe bhavati. Paktastha paktadhve bhavishyati. Paktahe iti bhavati, paktaswahe and paktasmahe. Vayam pashyama yad atra lat lakarena kinchit samyam vartate. Tari atra rupani yada pashyama, vayam pashyama yad atra kinchit lat lakarena saha rupani sangachanti. Astu, kintu atra ekam prayogam kartum prayatnam kurma. So this is the anadyatana bhavishyat. Okay, so you will cook food for your family. What will that happen? Tari tvam parivaraya bhojanam paktasi. Okay, that's in the future tense, like far away in the future, paktasi. And then you have, maybe you make that in the plural, so yuyam. Kim bhavishati? Yuyam parivarasya krite bhojanam paktastha iti bhavati tatra. Astu. And now if you're cooking for yourselves, you were cooking for yourselves, it would be paktadhve iti bhavishyati. Astu. Evam parivartanam kritva. So you can play with, changing either the numbers, or you can change, you can play by changing the direction of the fruit with parasmaipadi and atmanepadi. Tari bahu prakara atra dhatubhih saha kridam kartum shakyate. Kasmin lakare kridam bhavati, eka bhavati punah kaha purushaha, kim vachanam, sarvatra atra upayogaya bahu kridaha kalpayitum shaknuvanti. So you can really conceive of various kinds of games using the purusha, using the vachana, using the lakara, etc., etc., and also using the ubhayapadi, parasmaipadi. So this is something that you will be encountering in the assignment as well as in the tests. So we will be trying to play around with these permutations and combinations possible. Astu. So although this is an anadyatana bhavishyat, I must mention to you that praya vayam rit lakarasya eva adhikam prayogam kurma adyatve. We tend to use more of the rit lakara to talk of not only the adyatana bhavishyat but also the anadyatana bhavishyat is sometimes or often presented using the rit lakaraha. Okay. Tari lit eva atra asti adyatana bhavishyat iti. Tari tatra kim bhavati? Pakshati pakshataha pakshanti pakshasi pakshathaha pakshatha pakshyami pakshyavaha pakshyamaha. Okay. Tat itopi kinchid parichitam vartate, parichitaha rupaha, parichitam rupam vartate. Tatra kim bhavati? Atmanepadyam pakshate, pakshyete, pakshante, pakshase, pakshete, pakshadhve, pakshye, pakshyavahe, pakshyamahe. Tari, tonight we will cook some food for my brother, let's say. Tonight we, as in bahuvachane, we will cook food for my brother. So what will that be? Adya ratrau vayam asmakam or mama bhratuhu. It can be asmakam bhratuhu or mama bhratu, depends on whether it's my brother or our brother. Vayam bhojanam pakshyamaha. So because they're cooking it for somebody else. Supposing you were cooking food for yourselves tonight, then it will be vayam adya ratrau bhojanam pakshyamahe iti bhavishyati. Atmanepadyam bhavishyati. Uttamam. Agre gacchama. Tari atra vayam रूपाणां परिचयं प्राप्नुमः. तत्र परस्मैपदी आत्मनेपद्याः तुलनात्मकाध्ययनार्थम् एवं प्रस्तावनं कृतं वर्तते. अत्र वयं पश्यामः यथा लट्लकारे भवति तथैव भविष्यकाले रूपाणि भवन्ति. अतः एकस्य रूपस्य परिज्ञानेन तत्र भविष्यकालस्य विशेष रूपं ज्ञात्वा अन्ते यत् तिङन्तः अस्ति तत् प्रायः समानमेव भवति अत्र. Okay, so because there is a very great similarity between the lat or the vartamana kala and the rit or the bhavishyat kala, if we know one really well, then we can apply it for the other. Just knowing the different transformations like kshyati, it's not pachati but pakshyati, and you see that pakshyati is the same across parasmaipadi and atmanepadi. So once you learn that pattern, you will know the application of it. Astu tari agre gacchama. We are in the lot lakarah idanim, the ajyartham. Tatra kim bhavatu? Kim bhavati? Pachatu pachatat. Tari pachatu pachatat. Pachatat prayah vayam na pashyama. Kadachit tat sahitya eva bhavati. Bahu viralam eva sakshat abhyase tasya parichayah milati. Tari pachatu or pachatat, anantaram pachatam pachantu, pacha pachatat, samanam rupam asti tatra, pachatam pachata, pachani pachava pachama. Tari asmakam Narendraryah tatra prayah etasya dhatunam vishaye yada vadati, sahekam L rupena artham ekam tippanim dadati tatra. He gives a small note, so he says it is tam tam ta. Okay, so you see pachatam pachatam pachatta. So the tu from the Vartamana Kala, ti becomes tu, anti becomes antu, and then you've got pacha, which doesn't have any further ending there, and then pachami becomes pachani iti. Punah tatra pachavaha of the lat lakara becomes pachava, and pachamaha becomes pachama. Tari, you can see the similarities again if you know the lat very well, and you know the associative similarities with the other lakaras. Tari mukhasthakarane kinchit nyunah bharaha bhavati iti. So there's a little bit of your load of memorization is reduced if you can start identifying these patterns. Astu agre gachamah tatra atmanepadyam kim bhavati? Pachatam, but you see it's like the dvivachanam of the prathama purushaha. So pachatam, then pachetam. So that's similar to understand. Pachatam just gets the ekara pachetam and pachantam. So we see that in the first line you've got the tam, 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 that is the common thing, and you've got the a in the middle and the nakara for the bahuvachanam. Anantaram pachasva, and then pachetham, pachadhvam. Okay, so that is also a bit similar to your latlakaraha. Anantaram pachai, in the vartamana kala or the latlakara it was pache, so pachai. Pachavahe becomes pachavahai, and pachamahe becomes pachamahai. Astu. So there are similarities within the parasmaipadi and atmanepadi, and there are also similarities with other lakaras that you can fall back upon. Astu. Tari atra eka rupam pashyama. So cook food. So you all cook food for this group. So you all cook food for this group. How would you say that? You all, yuyam, cook food, bhojanam, pachata, for this group. So, for this group, you can either say etasya ganasya krite, or you can say etasmai ganaya. Iti can be another application there. Astu. So, yam bhojanam etasya ganasya krite pachata or etasmai ganaya pachata iti tatra bhavati. Astu spashtam. And if you say cook food for yourselves, it will be bhojanam pachadvam. You don't even need to say more than that. Huh? The moment you say that, it implies you're cooking food for yourselves. Huh? And that's here. Astu tari agre gachamaha. Rupani tatra parasparam परिचयार्थम अत्र स्थापितवती तर्हि सम्यक् पश्यन्तु do a lot of this visual grasping of the language एकं तु अस्ति यत् सम्भाषणम् उच्चैः पठित्वा भाषायाः श्रवणे तस्य युक्तिबोधः पुनः द्वितीय अस्ति तस्य दर्शने अपि युक्तिबोधः भवितुम् अर्हति. So when one you can acquire the logic by listening to the sounds of it and getting a feel of it, the taste of that verb format in your mouth. The other one is when you are visually also trying to grasp the similarities and differences in front of you. Astu, agre gachamaha. And what I would suggest you do is that you have a big sheet and you put the lakaras all side by side, and mark the endings, and then you'll see where all across which blocks of conjugations there will be the similarities that will appear. Tad evam api kartum shaknuvanti. Agre pashyama lang lakarasya tattu asti anadyatana bhuta iti etadapi kinchit parichitam eva asti. So this is also quite a familiar usage. Apachat, apachatam, apachan, apachaha, apachatam, apachata, apacham, apachava and apacham. I'd like to just draw your attention to the fact that this is close to the lot lakara. And why is it close there? If you just go back, you see pachatu, pachatam. So tam, tam, ta, pachani, pachava, pachama. Okay, pachatu and pachantu. Here, pachatu, pachantu and tam, tam, ta, pachani, pachava and pachama. Now let's look what happens here. So here you've got pachat, apachat. So the ta, it becomes an apachan. Okay, tu and antu sort of drop, the tu's drop off. And you got apachatam. And you see apachatam, apachatam, apachata. Tam, tam, ta, which is the same. And there you had pacha, it becomes apachaha. Visargaha tatra yojitam bhavati. Apacham, agachati, anantaram apachava and apachama iti bhavati. Tari militva ekavaram punarapi vadama. Apachat, apachatam, apachan, apachaha, apachatam, apachata, apacham, apachava, apachama. Uttamam. तर्हि आत्मनेपद्यां किं भवति इति अपचत, अपचेताम, अपचन्त, अपचथाः, अपचेथाम, अपचध्वम, अपचे, अपचावहि and अपचामहि. तत्र एकवारं पश्यामः कथं भवति. So पचै, पचावहै, पचामहै. अस्तु. तर्हि पुनः तत्र tham and dhvam are the same, but pachas is a little different with the lot. Pashantu atra. Pachathaha, pachetham and pachadhvam. So atra bahu samyam vartate. Astu. And atra ai asit, atra vahi and pachamahi iti bhavati. Tari ekam dhatum vadama. Tari, how would you say? I cooked food. I cooked food for everyone yesterday. So this is anadyatana bhuta. So not today's bhuta. So aham sarvesham krite bhojanam apacham uttamam. And I cooked food for myself yesterday. Aham hyaha bhojanam apache. Astu spashtam asti. Tari agre gachama. This is for you to do a comparative study again with the Atmanepadi and Parasmaipadi, or the Parasmaipadi first and then the Atmanepadi. Saptama lakare kim bhavati vidhiling iti tatra pachet, pachetam. So again you find similarities here. So you see the tam, tam, ta again appearing in the L in the middle like that, and pacheva and pachema. And you see the of the bhuta kalab here becomes pacheyamma. So there's a ya that enters into that, but otherwise it's pachet and then pacheyuhu. There it was apachan. Atra pacheyuhu bhavati. Some similarities and some differences, but patterns santi tatra. Tatra apachaha, atra apachehe. So the chehe is a feature of the vidhiling. You see it's there in the parasmepadi and in the atmanepadi. Tari not a, but pachet. The a literally is a prefix that indicates that which is not there now. So yatha satyam asatyam, that which is not true. So pachat, apachat, that a makes it is not true now. So here it is pachet. So you must do that, vidhiling. So pachet, pachetam, pacheyuhu, pachehe, pachetam, pacheta, pacheyam, pacheva and pachema. Uttamam. Atmanepadyam kim bhavati? Pacheta, pacheyatam. Tari atra ya iti yojitam bhavati. Pacheyatam, pacheran, pachethaha, pacheyatham, pachedhvam, pacheya, pachevahi and pachemahi. Punarapi ekasyam, ekasmin patre yadi rupani likhanti sarvani or sarvan lakaran likhanti chet tatra spashtam bhavishyati paraspara sambandham api. Okay, so if you write it all out on one big sheet of paper with color codes, you'll be able to identify the similarities and differences that are there between the different tenses and moods. Astu, tarhi, how would you say that they should cook food for the yajna, let's say. So they should cook food for the yajna. Tari, they should cook. Te pacheyuhu. What should they pacheyuhu? Bhojanam, or let's say prasad. Tari te prasadam pacheyuhu. For what? Yajnaya. For the sacrifice or for the yajna. Tari te yajnaya prasadam pacheyuhu iti bhavati. And they cook for themselves, kim bhavishati? Te bhojanam or prasadam pacheran. So they cooked the prasad for themselves, iti bhavati. So here you've got the comparative form of the vidhiling. Astu? Tari pashyatu kim samanam kim cha tatra bhinnam asti. Astu. Agre gacchama. Atra ashirling asti. Atra pashyama punaha kim samanam kim cha bhinnam asti. Tari pachyat. Tari tatra pachet asid atra च्या इति प्रवेशः भवति. तर्हि पश्चात् पश्यतु, परस्मैपद्यां तु सर्वत्र समानः तत्र आगमः रूपेण वर्तते. Okay, that's the new addition that is there everywhere. पश्चात् पश्चास्तां tam tam ta asti. Okay, that you can see here. But here you have got this extra pachyastam pachyasuhu. And tatra asit. Let's look at the vidhiling atra. Sorry, atra eva asti pacheyuhu. And here you have pachyasuhu. Okay. Then pachyaha. What was it here? It was pachehe. So the che is replaced by the chaha in the ashirling. Pachyaha, pachyastam, pachyasta, pachyasam, pachyasva, pachyasma. Astu. So what I'd really like to invite you to do is, once you've seen it, tari netre nimilya, see if you can again recollect the forms. So even if you can do it once when it is there, at least that will give you some confidence that you're able to grasp the different formats of it, at least for that moment. But tasyapi abhyasam ekavaram kurvantu. So don't just do passively. You can do the pause button, see if you can repeat it, you learn it, write it out. Likhanti ched avashyam tasya smaranam varataram bhavati. Okay. Agre gachama. Tatra atmanepadyam kim bhavati? Pakshishta pakshiyastam pakshiran pakshishtaha pakshiyastham pakshidvam pakshiya pakshivahi and pakshimahi. Astu. So this is a blessing really when it says that tvam pakshishtaha, tvam bhojanam pakshishtaha. So cook food for yourself as a blessing would be something as grand as pakshishtaha. So there is this grandeur about this Ashirling a little bit. So you should uktva, try and get this feeling of the sounds of the language. But I just like to do a small comparison with the Atmanepada of the Vidhiling. So you see, it is Pachethaha becomes Pakshishtaha. Thaha, it becomes Thaha, and the Sakara becomes the Shakara there, because the Tha becomes the Tha there. Astu. See, Pakshiyastham, and Atra asti Pacheyatham. So Yas has got added there. Pachedhvam, Pakshidhvam. Pakshiya, Pakshivahi, and Pakshimahi. Pacheya, Pachevahi, and Pachemahi. So you see the similarities or the closeness that is there. Tari atra tu ekam vakyam abhavat pacyastam. So yuvam bhojanam. So you cook food as a blessing. Cook food for the puja. Supposing. So you too cook food for the puja. What will it be? So you too cook food will be yuvam bhojanam pacyastam. For the puja. Chaturthi vibhakti bhavati. Tari pujayai. Tari yuvam pujayai bhojanam pacyastam. But you don't even need to say yuvam if you say pacyastam. Ataha, you can reduce it very simply to cook food for the puja will become pujayai bhojanam pacyastam iti. Astu. And cook food for yourselves will become bhojanam pakshiyastham iti bhavati. Tari भिन्न रूपम अस्ति, किंतु कथनेन तस्य परिचयः वर्धिष्यते. Another comparative table for you here. नवम गणः लुङ् तत्र किं भवति? नवम लकारः अद्यतनभूत अस्ति. तत्र अपाक्षीत्, अपाक्ताम्, अपाक्षुः, अपाक्षीः, अपाक्तम्, अपाक्त, apaksham, apakshva, apakshma. So I'd also like to mention that prayoge lungaha prayogaha viralaha eva bhavati samanya sambhashane praya tasya sahitye eva rupa darshanam bhavati. Atra yatha vayam bhavishya-kalasya api kritavantaha bhavishya-kale yatha vayam adyatana bhavishyasya eva अन्यस्मिन् काले अनद्यतन भविष्ये अपि उपयोगं कुर्मः. तथैव वयम् अनद्यतनभूतस्य अद्यतनभूते अपि उपयोगं कुर्मः. So we tend to say aham apacham, for example. Aham adya pratah bhojanam apacham is what we would tend to say normally. But here we see that if it is actually within the framework of today, it should be aham adya bhojanam apaksham. Okay? Tarhi adya apakshit, apakshatam, apakshuhu, apakshihi, apaktam, apakta, apaksham, apakshwa, and apakshma. Astu. And atra vayam atmanepadyam rupani yada pashyama tari kim bhavati? Apakta, apakshatam, apakshata, apakthaha, apakshatham, apagdhvam, apakshi, apakshvahi, and apakshmahi. Please say these words because, like I said in the previous case also, you'll discover very different parts of your vocal system by trying to just pronounce these these word formations or these verb conjugations. Astu, tari apakshit. Yes, saha bhojanam apakshit iti bhavati. Okay. Tari agre gacchama atra. We do see the application of this in certain contexts, like if in the context of the bhu dhatu. So you would say, for example, that adya pratah vrishtir abhut. So this abhut has a sense of it happened a few hours back, that kind of a sense. And apakshit, so the food was cooked this morning, let's say, in that context. Astu, tari agre gacchama. Antima lakarah asti ring lakarah. Tatra kim bhavati? Yatha atra likhitamasi apaksyat. So I told you it is a combination of the bhuta and the vartaman bhavishya kala. So you've got apakshyat. So would have cooked. Tari yadi samayaha abhavishyat saha bhojanam sarvesham krite apakshyat. So if there was time, then he would have cooked food for everybody. Tari yadi samayaha abhavishyat, if there had been time or if there would have been time, then tada saha bhojanam apakshyat sarvesham krite. Then he would have cooked food apakshyat for everybody. Sarvesham krite iti bhavati. Astu, tari tasya rupani pashyama. Apakshatam, apakshyan, apakshyah, apakshatam, apakshata, apakshyam, apakshyava and apakshyam. That if you know the lang lakara well and you know the lrit lakara well, then you know very easily how to do the kriyatipatil ring. There is zero extra investment in learning how to do the kriyatipatil ring. Karanam etadvayo eva tatra melanam asti. Atra we have not written kriyatipatil ring, but that's how it is said in some parts of the country. Astu. And then in the Atmanepadi kim bhavati? Apakshyata, apakshyetam, apakshanta, apakshyathaha, apakshyetham, apakshadhvam, apakshye, apakshyavahi and apakshyamahi. Astu, spashtam asti. Tari agre pashyama. Atra rupani bhavanti. So how would you say? If we had the time, we would have cooked food for ourselves. How would you say that? Yadi samayaha abhavishyat vayam bhojanam apakshyamahi iti. Astu, spashtam. How would you do that in the for the dvivachanam? Yadi samayaha abhavishyat, that remains the same. Avam bhojanam apakshya-vahi. You don't even need to say the avam because vahi indicates it all. Tatra eva Sanskrita bhashayaha brevity bhavati and precision api bhavati. Astu, spashtam asti. Tari agre gachhama. Astu. So thus far we've looked at the dasha lakaras for the pach dhatu, which is from the bhuadi ganaha, and we've looked at it in its ubhayapadi format. So with the parasmepadi and the atmanepadi kept side by side so that you can do a comparative study of the changes that the verb undergoes in both these forms. Astu. Tari idanim, what I'd love to do for you is to introduce you to the passive voice or the karma vachyam. Tari karma vachyasya parichayam idanim aham kartum ichhami. Tatra kechana niyamaha santi. Yena tat kartum sahajam api bhavati. So let's look at some of the rules that are associated with these different voices. Kartru vachyam atra kim vadati lakshanam kartru vachyasya prathama kartru karake dvitiyantam bhavet karma kartradhinam kriyapadam. So what is it saying? Lakshanam kartrivachyasya prathama kartrikarake. So it is the first in the kartrikaraka. It is the subject will get the kartrikarakam. Dvitiyantam bhavet karma. So the dvitiya vibhakti will come on the karma. And kartradhinam kriyapadam. And the verb will match with the subject there or the karta. Karmavachye kim bhavati pashyama. Karmavachya prayoge tu tritiya kartrikarake prathamantam bhavet karma karmadhinam kriyapadam. So very interesting, it changes positions here. It says karmavachya prayoge tu tritiya kartrikarake. So the kartrikarakam or the nominative case atra will become the tritiya vibhakti and prathamantam bhavet karma. Now the karma will become the prathama vibhakti. Karmadhinam kriyapadam. And how do you decide what kind of verb ending you will get? It will go according to the karma, which has now become the subject because it has the prathama vibhakti on it. Astu. Bhavavachye kim bhavati. So bhavavachya is often when there is no object. It's an intransitive verb. Astu. Tatra kim bhavati. Bhave kartus tritiya syat karma bhavascha sarvada prathama purushasya vachanam syat kriya pade. Astu. So what are they saying there? Bhave kartus tritiya syat. So in the bhava vachyam, the kartu gets a tritiya, like in the karma vachyam. Astu. Karma bhavascha sarvada. Sarvada. There is no karma there because it is an intransitive verb. There is no object there. So Prathama Purusha Ekavachanam Syat Kriyapade, and therefore the Kriyapadam will always be in the Prathama Purushasya Ekavachanam. Iti atra uchyate. Karma Bhava Vachyayoho Rupa Siddhi Niyamaha. So what is the Rupa Siddhi or the rule for the Karma and Bhava Vachya, the two of them? So it says here, Karma Vachya Prayoge Tritiya Kartra Karake Prathamantam Bhavet Karma Karmadhinam Kriyapadam, and that's what we've looked at previously. And it says Bhave Karmani Vachye Cha Sada Syad Atmanepadam Ladadishu Chaturshveva Yakarasya Bhavet. So what are they saying here? They are saying that Bhave Karmani Vachyecha. So in both these contexts of the Bhava Vachyam and the Karmani Vachyam, what happens? Sada Syad Atmanepadam. So the verb will always be in the Atmanepadam, Prathamataha. Then Ladadishu. So Lat Adishu, Chaturshveshu, which is the Lat, Lot, Lang and Vidhiling. Yakarasya Bhavet. So you have to add in the Yakara. So let's try and do an example tatra. Astu, tari atra asti Chhatraha Granthaha Pathati. Tari niyamaha ka asti that Prathama Tritiya Bhavati, Dvitiya Prathama Bhavati. Astu, tari atra we've got the Prathama Vibhakti and here we've got the Dvitiya Vibhakti. So what is it saying? That the Prathama Vibhakti will become the Tritiya, and at the same time we've got the Dvitiya Vibhakti, which is the Karma, now becomes the Prathama Vibhakti. Astu. So what do we get here finally? We have the verb pathyate. How did that happen? So you see it says that Atmanepadam Bhavati, Sada Atmanepadam. So it's Atmanepadam. And Ladadishu Chaturshveshu Yakara Agamaha. So you see there is a pat ya. Ya comes in because of this rule here, this indication here. And you put it in the Vartamana Kala. So if your first verb is in the Vartamana Kala, it will take that same tense in the Atmanepadi also. Parasmapadyam, Atmanepadyam, Samanameva Rupam Bhavati. And Ataha Vayam Idanim Yani Rupani Lakarani Vayam Dasha Lakaraha Drishthavantaha Tasya Atra Upayogaha Bhavitum Arhati. Astu, Tari Chhatraha Grantham Pathati. Tell me, Chhatrena Grantha Pathyate. Uttamam. Next. Chhatraha Granthan Pathati. So, one student reading many books. What happens if you do it in the Karma Vachyam? So, Chhatraha becomes Chhatrena, Tritiya. So, 1 becomes 3 and 2. Okay, so this is 2 plural. Becomes 2 nominative or the Prathama Vibhakti. Astu. And then, what does it say here also? That the verb will go along with the karta here. So what happens? You get pathati becomes pathyante because granthaha. Granthaha pathyante, which is bahu. The bahuvachanam. Spashtam asti. Astu. Agre pashyama itopi kinchit permutation and combination. Chhatraha grantham or granthan pathanti. So if it is grantham, so Chhatraha. Now the subject is plural, Tari Chhatrahi. Grantham. Okay, so this is your singular and the second Vibhakti. And you've got here the Granthaha. Okay, so this becomes the Prathama and the singular. And Granthan, if it's plural. So if it is plural and the Dvitiya, it will become the plural and the Prathama. And pathanti, because it goes with the noun, it will either be pathyate if it goes for the singular, and it will be pathyante if it goes with the plural format of it. Astu, spashtamasti, abhyasam kurma kinchit. So let's do some practice here. Chhatraha pustakani pathati. Kim bhavati? Chhatrena. Okay, prathama tritiya bhavati. Pustakani, we cannot really see the difference, so it will stay the same, although in this case it is the Prathama Vibhakti now. Pustakani and Pathyante. Uttamam. Okay, so it becomes Pathyante. Next one, Tvam Mam Vadasi. What happens then? Uttamam. Tritiya will be Tvaya. Mam will become Aham. Uttamam. tvaya aham udye. Now tell me, there has to be a small correction here. Uttamam. This will become a mahalant there. So tvaya aham udye. Next, aham ramayanam pathami. Kim bhavati? Aham kim bhavishyati? Maya. So tvam becomes tvaya, aham becomes maya. Maya Ramayanam, because it is a kavyam, and then because it is singular, it will become pathyate. Astu spashtamasti? Maya Ramayanam pathyate. Uttamam. Next, vayam nagaram gacchamaha. Kim bhavishyati? Tritiya karotu. Uttamam. Asmabhihi nagaram. Ataha samanam tishtati yataha tad napunsakallinga padam asti. So dvitiya vibhakti, prathama vibhakti samanam tishtati, and then it will be gacchamaha gamyate. Astu. So asmabhi nagaram gamyate. So it literally means that the town is gone by us. This is the passive format here. And then you've got tvam chandram pashya. So that's the lot lakara. So you have to change to the atmanepada in the lot form itself. Tari kim bhavishyati? Prathamam atra. How would you do it? It is tvaya chandraha. So prathama becomes tritiya, dvitiya becomes prathama. That's like a formula. And then pashya is the lot lakara. Ataha atra bhavishyati drishyatam. Or if you say pashyasi, it will become drishya tvaya chandraha drishyate. Astu spashtamasti. So the moon is seen by you. Ityartha bhavati atra. So let's see what happens to the last sentence, which is balakah chandram apashyat becomes prathama becomes tritiya. So balakena chandram, dvitiya becomes prathama. So chandraha, and apashyat will become a drishyata. Because it has to be in the same kala. So the lang lakara here, and that is what you have here. Astu, just one small note I want to add about the passive voice. The passive voice somehow is the more natural voice in the Sanskrit language. Atra adhikam swabhavikam asti karmavachye sambhashitum natu kartrivachye sambhashitum. Atari vayam yada vadama maya gamyate natu aham gacchami tat adhunika kale adhikam jatam vartate. किंतु यदि वयं प्रौढान् शृण्मः, यदि वयं अस्माकं ज्येष्ठान् शृण्मः, वयं शृण्मः यत् तत्र प्रायः कर्मवाच्यस्य एव प्रयोगः अधिकः भवति. अस्तु, तर्हि एतत्तु आरम्भमात्रम्. अग्रिमवर्गेषु वयम् एतस्य इतोपि विवरणं करिष्यामः, एतस्य बोधम् अपि अधिकं दास्यामः. अभ्यासस्य तु अवसरः भवत्येव. तर्हि तत्र अवश्यं भवन्तः सम्यक् स्वस्य अपि प्रयासं कुर्वन्तु इति प्रार्थना अस्ति. So just a quick note here that the karma vacham is somehow, or the passive voice is the more natural voice in the Sanskrit language. We don't really use so easily the active voice of I go there. You would tend to, or there was a preference, let me say, for saying that the place is gone by me, which is very absurd if you say it in English. But in the Sanskrit language, we've heard our elders and all use more of the passive voice in a natural sambhashanam tatra bhavati. And there are other kinds of philosophical reasons also, that one is more an instrument of life's experiences than the doer of life's activities. Ataha passive voice tatra swabhavena sangachati iti. So let's do a conversation with Piyush.
नमस्ते आर्ये, भवती कुशलिनी किम?
आम पीयूषः, नमस्ते. कुशलिनी अहं कुशलं कामये. वदतु, अद्यतन लकारस्य पाठात् तव कोऽपि प्रश्नः अस्ति किम्?
आम् आर्ये, दशगणान् सर्वदा स्मर्तुं क्लेशो भवति. कोऽपि सहजोपायः अस्ति चेत् कृपया वदतु.
साधु प्रश्नः, प्रयतिष्ये तत् सहजतरं कर्तुम्. अस्तु
अस्तु आर्ये, वदतु. एतेन अस्माकम् अन्येषां छात्राणामपि लाभो भविष्यति।
सुष्ठु तर्हि शृणु। प्रायशः लट् लकारस्य उत वर्तमानकालस्य लृट् लकारस्य च उत भविष्यकालस्य तिङन्तभागः समानः एव। यथा भवति, भवतः, भवन्ति तथैव भविष्यति, भविष्यतः, भविष्यन्ति इति भवति। पुनः लोटः उत आज्ञायाः लङ्लकारेण साम्यम् अस्ति बहुषु स्थानेषु, विशेषतः द्विवचने। यथा गच्छतां तत्र अगच्छतां भवति लङि। एवमेव विधिलिङ्गः लङ्लकारेण रूपाणि सङ्गच्छन्ति। यथा गच्छेत्, अगच्छत् इत्यादयः। अन्ते तु लृङ् रूपाणि स्मर्तुं कोऽपि क्लेशः न स्यात्, यतः तत् रूपं लङ् लृटयोः और लृट्योः, लङ् लृट्योः उत अनद्यतनभूतभविष्ययोः सम्मेलनेन जातम् अस्ति। यथा अगमिष्यत्, अखादिष्यत् अथवा अपक्ष्यत् इति।
उत्तमम् आर्ये। अहं भवत्याः वचनानि स्मर्तुं प्रयतिष्ये। अन्तिमः एकः प्रश्नः अस्ति। आत्मनेपद्याः परस्मैपद्याः रूपाणि कथं मुखस्थं कर्तुं शक्नुमः, कृपया वदतु।
मम अध्यापकस्य नरेन्द्र आर्यस्य पुस्तके बहूनि व्याकरणगीतानि सन्ति। तेषु एकम् एतदर्थम् एव तेन विरचितं। स्पीक् संस्कृत ईज़ी वे इति पुस्तके ते सर्वे अपि लभन्ते। समयः भवति चेत् अवश्यं पठ।
अस्तु आर्ये, अनुगृहीतोऽस्मि। शुभमस्तु।
शुभमस्तु। अस्तु, तर्हि अहं चिन्तितवती नरेन्द्र आर्यस्य एकं गीतम् अत्रैव प्रस्तौमि इति। तर्हि एतदस्ति धातुरूपसारण्याः गीतं। किमस्ति तत्र नाम अद्य श्वः आर्य ह्यः विधिपूर्वकम्। अत्र पश्यन्तु, सः वदति एतानि अथवा अत्र लकारस्य लक्षणानि सन्ति। यथा अद्य वर्तमानकाल, श्वः भविष्यकाल, आर्य लोट्, ह्यः अनद्यतनभूत, विधिलिङ् इति अत्र विधिपूर्वकं। तेषां कृते अत्र एतानि रूपाणि सङ्गच्छन्ति। यथा आमि एण्ड् गमिष्यामि श्वः, पुनः अद्य कृते गच्छतः, आनि आर्य, अहं गच्छामि, अहम् अगच्छं ह्यः कृते, एण्ड् गच्छेयं विधिपूर्वकम्। एवम् अत्र परस्मैपदी, अत्र आत्मनेपदी भिन्नभिन्नपुरुषाणां कृते अत्र दत्तमस्ति। तर्हि प्रयत्नं कुर्मः। अस्तु। अद्य श्वः आर्य ह्यः विधिपूर्वकम्। आमि आनि अं यम् ए ऐ एय, आमि आनि अं यम् ए ऐ एय, आवः आव आव एव हे है हि हि, आवः आव आव एव हे है हि हि। यूयं थथध्वे ध्वं, यूयं थथध्वे ध्वं, त्वं सिस् सिस्वथास्, आमि आनि अं यम् ए ऐ एय, आवः आव आव एव हे है हि हि। न्ति न्तु न्युह्ते, न्ते न्ताम् न्तरन्, तित्तुत्सः तेतां त, यूयं थथध्वे ध्वं, यूयं थथध्वे ध्वम्। अनन्तरं तस्तां तौ एते एताम् एयातां, तस्तां तौ एते एताम् एयातां, थस्तं युवाम् एते एथे एथाम् एयाथां, थस्तं युवाम् एथे एथाम् एयाथां, यूयं थथध्वे ध्वं, यूयं थथध्वे ध्वं, त्वं सिस् सिस्वथास्, आमि आनि अं यम् ए ऐ एय, आवः आव आव एव हे है हि हि, आवः आव आव एव हे है हि हि इति तस्य गीतमस्ति। किञ्चित् आनन्दपूर्वकं व्याकरणस्य पाठः अपि भवितुं अर्हति एतेन मार्गेण। अस्तु, मूविङ्ग् आन् टु द इम्पार्टेण्ट् पार्ट्। इदानीं धर्म पदस्य गुणाः के सन्ति इति वयं दृष्टवन्तः। एकवारं मिलित्वा पठामः एतत्। क्षमा सत्यं दमः शौचं दानमिन्द्रियसंयमः अहिंसा गुरुशुश्रूषा तीर्थानुसरणं दया आर्जवं लोभशून्यत्वं देवब्राह्मणपूजनम् अनभ्यसूया च तथा धर्मः सामान्य उच्यते इति। एतावता वयं गुरुशुश्रूषां पर्यन्तं गतवर्गे दृष्टवन्तः। तीर्थानुसरणम् इति अत्र वयं द्रक्ष्यामः। तर्हि तीर्थानुसरणं किम् इत्युक्ते तीर्थ प्लस् अनुसरणं। तीर्थानुसरणम् इत्येतस्य व्युत्पत्तिर्कथं भवति नाम तीर्थानाम् अनुसरणम् इति तीर्थानुसरणं षष्ठी तत्पुरुषसमासः। तीर्थः इत्युक्ते किं? तीर्थः नाम तरति पापादिकं यस्मात्। अस्तु, तर्हि अनुसरणं नाम किम्? अनुसरणं नाम अनुगमनं, टु गो आफ्टर्, टु फॉलो। अतः तीर्थानुसरणं नाम टु फॉलो दोस् वेस् और थिङ्ग्स् विच सेव् अस् और help us escape, or that help us escape from sins iti bhavati. In other words, tirtha is some actions which help us to overcome or surpass the sins. So tirtha is some action which help us to overcome or surpass sins, or overcome. You can even say overcome. Overcome sins. Agre gacchama. Tatra tirtham trividham uchyate. Sthavaram bhumau bhinna bhinna sthana darshanam. Punah jangamam kimasi vakyavarina ityukte yatra yatra guravah satsangam kurvanti tatra gatva tesham vachananam shravanena asmakam punyam bhavati. Vari dwara punya vari athava punya ganga nadi iva तत्र तेषां वचनानि अस्मान् प्रक्षालयन्ति। अतः तदपि पुण्य गमनमस्ति, तीर्थगमनम् इति मन्यन्ते। मानसं सद्गुणैः भवति, by virtuous qualities, and एतदेव अति मुख्यं तत्र कीर्तितं वर्तते। तर्हि मानसतीर्थलक्षणं किं किम् अस्ति? सत्यं तीर्थं, क्षमा तीर्थं, तीर्थम् इन्द्रियनिग्रहः, सर्वभूतदया तीर्थं, सर्वत्रार्जवमेव च, दानं तीर्थं, दमस्तीर्थं, सन्तोषस्तीर्थमुच्यते, ब्रह्मचर्यं परं तीर्थं, तीर्थं च प्रियवादिता, ज्ञानं तीर्थं, धृतिस्तीर्थं, पुण्यं तीर्थम् उदाहृतं, तीर्थानामपि तत्तीर्थं, विशुद्धिर्मनसः पराः, एतत् ते कथितं देवी मानसं तीर्थलक्षणम्। एतत् काशीखण्डः स्कन्दपुराणे अस्ति एंड शब्दकल्पद्रुमे एतत् वर्तते। एतत् सर्वमपि पीयूषस्य शोधकार्यद्वारा अत्र उपस्थापितः अस्ति। अतः इतोपि गुणविषये ज्ञातुम् इच्छन्ति चेत् सः तत्र उत्तमः मार्गदर्शकः भवितुमर्हति। एतस्य अर्थः कः? What's the meaning of all this? Truth, forgiveness, control of senses, compassion towards all beings, straightforwardness in all places are all deliverers or pilgrimages. Charity, control, contentment are deliverers, but the supreme deliverance comes from abstinence, brahmacharyam, and following the path of the absolute, iti. Astu. Next is knowledge, self-command or courage, virtue are all said to be pilgrimages. Of all the pilgrimages or deliverers, is that para, or the reality beyond the mind. This, O goddess, these are the characteristics of psychological pilgrimages. So here actually he says, this, O goddess, I say unto you, etat te kathitam devi. So this goddess, I say to you. These are the characteristics of psychological or the mental pilgrimages. Another part, who benefits from the tirthanusaranam? Tarhi yasya hastau cha padau cha manaschaiva susanyatam vidya tapascha kirtischa tirtha phalamashnute. Again, close. And And who benefits from Tirthanusaranam? Yasya hastau cha padau cha manaschaiva susanyatam vidya tapascha kirtischa satirtha phalamashnuте pratigrahadupavrittaha santushto yena kenachit ahankara vimuktascha satirtha phalamashnuте adambhiko nirarambho lagvaharo jitendriyaha vimuktah sarvasangaisyaha satirtha phalamashnuте akopano malamatihi satyavadi dridhavrataha atmopamascha bhuteshu satirtha phalamashnutte. So who all enjoy the fruits of tirtha? He says, the one whose hands and feet and mind are well controlled and is endowed with knowledge, austerity and fame. Such a person tastes the fruit of tirtha. One who returns satisfied with whatever he or she has received and is free from ego. Such a person tastes the fruit of tirtham. One free of arrogance who abstains from all work, eats little, has controlled senses, liberated and of all company, liberated in and of all company, eats the fruit of tirtha, is not short-tempered, is pure-minded, truth-speaking, fulfills his or her vows, regards the world as themselves. This is very beautiful. Atmopamascha. It really treats the world as if they are themselves. Such a person eats the fruit of a tirtham. And I'd just like to share with you here that particular very famous verse that is almost like the hallmark of the Indian culture, which is Ayam nijaha paroveti ganana laghu chetasam udara charitanam tu vasudhaiva kutumbakam. So it says Ayam nijaha paroveti. So this is mine, this is the other person's ganana, calculation. Laghu chetasam, the people who have a petty mind enter into these kinds of calculations. Udara charitanantu, those who have a generous spirit. Vasudhaiva kutumbakam, the whole universe is their family. Astu. And some benefits of Tirthanusaranam according to Paramahamsa Yogananda, when he talks of pilgrimages, he says, if you go to places where masters have lived, the vibrations there will quicken your realization. That is the value of pilgrimages to holy places. The master's divine vibrations are still there, just as strong as when they were physically present. Those who are in tune will feel that presence. But first, one has to meditate and prepare himself. Kinchit references. Tarhi aham asham karomi yat atra dashalakaranam api kinchit parichayah jata. Tari dhatunam vishay idanim kinchit atma vishwasah vardhita asti iti aham vicharayami. And tatra api dhatunam abhyasa kartumi topi bahu asti tatra bhavantah drishtavantah yad bahavaha tatra dhatavaha santi. Ataha pathanasya tu paryaptata nasti किंतु संभाषणं यदि कुर्वन्ति द्रक्ष्यन्ति यत् इतोपि शीघ्र तरं तत्र भाषायाः ग्रहणं भविष्यति. अतः कृपया संस्कृतं वदन्तु, संस्कृतं वदन्तु, संस्कृतं वदन्तु इति उक्त्वा अत्र विनम्रभावेन शुभमस्तु इति कामयन्ति विरमामि.